Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today I am going to be starting a new series. This is going to be Rogue Deck Wednesdays. So every Wednesday from now on I will be showcasing a different rogue deck that has some semblance of competitiveness to it. There's really not going to be anything that I will or will not showcase as long as the deck doesn't just suck toes. So to get going here, I'm going to be showcasing one of my all-time favorite decks. Now this is a deck that I have actually built and I have in real life. I've always loved this. Ever since I watched Rank 10 Wygo's videos quite a few years ago, I found this deck through him. He loves this deck. Rada is the guy's name. If you haven't seen him, check him out. His YouTube videos are great. He has actually a couple videos over this deck when they released the new support. Kind of went crazy. It was a lot of fun watching him, react to it, play a couple games with the deck, showcase it a little bit, and yeah, ever since then I've been a really big fan of this deck. This deck either wins hard or loses even harder. It's definitely a go-in second strategy. I wouldn't recommend playing this deck going first. While you can set up a relatively decent turn 1 board where you can interact with your opponent, it's definitely better to go second and just try to OTK, when you can. So let's just go ahead and jump right into the deck profile. I'll explain my card choices near the end, and hopefully I'll have a few duels after this, so let's go for it. First of all, we have 3 Nibiru. You can definitely see my standard hand trap lineup here. We have the 3 Nibiru, 3 Ash, and 3 Imperm. Those are just my preferred choices for hand traps this format. We have 2 Night Express Knight, 1 copy of Super Express Bullet Train, Heavy Freight Train Dara Crane at 3. This is definitely one of the best cards in the deck. We have Golden Lord at 1, and a lot of you might be wondering about this. I'll touch on it here at the end, but this card is actually really good in this deck. Then we play 1 Ruffian Railcar, 2 copies of Flying Pegasus Railroad Stampede. I don't think I've ever called him anything other than Pegasus, but he does have a very lengthy name, just like all the other train monsters do. 3 Ash Blossom. Moving on to the spells, we have Lightning Storm, 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster, 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance, 1 Terraforming, 1 Called by the Grave, 3 Forbidden Droplet, 3 copies of Urgent Schedule, one of the other best cards in the deck, 1 Set Rotation, 3 Revolving Switchyard, 2 Mystic Mine because this card is just broken, and if a lot of, the meta doesn't really play main deck outs to it. I know decks like Virtual World definitely main deck an out to it, and you might be running against main deck outs if you play against like Eldritch Zoo because they have Conquistador, or even Pure Zoo because I think a lot of Pure Zoo decks right now are running Cosmic Cyclone. But this card is just degenerate. Like, in the last video when I was talking about unhealthy strategies, Mystic Mine definitely should have been kind of flashed up on the screen there just because this card does not promote player interaction whatsoever, but it is imperative to play it in this deck, and I'll explain that a little bit more. And then to wrap up the main deck here, we have 3 Infinite Impermanents. Going on to the extra deck, we play 3 copies of AA Zeus, 3 copies of Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Juggernaut Libe. Then we have 3 copies of number 81, Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Super Dora. We also have 3 copies of Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Gustav Max. And then rounding up the extra deck, we have 3 copies of Double-Headed Anger Knuckler. Moving on to the side deck here, we have 2 copies of Zoo King Alpha, 1 Pankratops, 3 Token Collector, 3 Lancia, 3 Cosmic Cyclone, 1 Red Reboot, 1 Skill Drain, which for some reason the image just wouldn't pop up on EDO Pro, and then 1 copy of Metaverse. So let's do a quick deck discussion before we jump into the dual replays here. Obviously, Nibiru is a high impact hand trap that removes resources from your opponent, and it puts a token on your opponent's side of the field. If they can't continue to extend with a token, you're able to utilize cards like Heavy Freight Train Dara Crane when it's detached as material from one of your Exceeds monsters to pop the token, and then you have an easy OTK. We have 2 Night Express Knight here. This card is the normal summon of your deck. It cannot be special summoned from the deck, so unfortunately you cannot bring it out with Urgent Schedule, but you can just normal summon it without tributing, and its attack becomes 0. Then we play 1 copy of Super Express Bullet Train. The singular copy here is just because it's not always live. It is a really good card because on the end phase, if it's in the graveyard, you can add back one of your Earth Machine type monsters from your grave back to your hand. You can also shuffle back extra deck monsters in your graveyard, so if you maybe used Pot of Extravagance and you banished some of your extra deck monsters and you only have 1 copy left that you'd like to recycle, you can always do that. But the thing that makes it not as strong as the other trains is that you have to control all Earth Machine monsters to special summon this from your hand. So the fact that you can just special summon it, it's a level 10 that you can use to overlay with. It's just that summoning restriction where you have to at least control one Earth Machine monster and you can't control any other types of monsters to summon it that makes me really just want to play it at 1. You can usually search it, and when you need it, you know, it's always going to be there for you. But it's got like a secondary clause also. While it's on the field, it can't attack unless you send 2 other cards you control to the graveyard. So this isn't always terrible, especially if you're really kind of struggling to push for damage. Maybe your opponent has whittled themselves down to low life and you can summon this card, swing with it because it's just a big body, you know, just kind of like early game to mid game, you're really not going to be swinging with this card. It'd be nice if you could, but unfortunately its drawbacks just really hinder it from being kind of broken in the deck. Deracrane. This card summons itself from your hand if you normal or special summon any Earth Machine type monster, and the summon effect is once per turn, but the effect that isn't once per turn is its pop effect. When this card is detached from an Xyz monster and sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 card on the field and destroy it. This card is insane. I can't believe its secondary effect is not once per turn, because the pop effect is really what kind of brings this card to life and makes the deck really good. You can actually just summon 2 of these if you can search 1 off of Switchyard and then Urgent Schedule out 2 monsters. Urgent Schedule is a quick play spell card that if your opponent controls, I think it's more monsters than you do. Yeah, if they control more monsters than you do, you can special summon 1 level 4 and 1 level 10 Earth Machine monster from your deck in defense position, and their effects are negated. So if you have Urgent Schedule and Deracrane, you could Urgent Schedule out 2 monsters, so it would probably be like the Ruffian Railcar and then a Deracrane. Then you summon the other Deracrane from your hand, overlay for a Gustav Max, detach, burn your opponent for 2,000, Deracrane in the graveyard, pop a card, overlay for Libe, detach again, Deracrane pops another card on the field, and then you're looking at most likely a 6,000 direct attack, and if you can do the math, 6,000 plus 2,000 is 8,000, and that is exact game. This deck is really crazy at just killing your opponent in a single turn, and Deracrane is definitely a card that helps facilitate that OTK. Moving on here, the 1 Golden Lord is played because it's good discard fodder for Switchyard, because Switchyard has to discard a card in your hand to search an Earth Machine type monster from your deck. And this card in and of itself can send, you know, Mystic Mine off the field, or can send the field spell after you've used him, and he's level 10. That's the big get here. He's level 10. He's spot removal in your hand, so you can just discard a card and discard a spell or trap in Golden Lord, then send a card on the field to the graveyard. He can bring himself back as a level 10. He also gets just huge. It's insane. He becomes a 3,500 beat stick that can't be destroyed by card effect, which in and of itself is just insane. So he's really there. Big pushes, spot removal, recurability. He's just like a level 10 that you're always going to have access to past turn 1 if you have him in your hand. You can't really search him in this deck if you want to keep it at 40 cards, so playing him at 1 is kind of like the OCG move because they play him at 1 in their train builds. It's just like never bad to have in your hand, but you really don't want multiple copies, so just having him is kind of like that random one of isn't necessarily bad. The last one that we play in the monster lineup is Ruffian Railcar. This is a good card just to kind of summon from your deck turn, I guess technically your turn 1, but turn 2 in the game, because in the end phase, if you don't kill your opponent, he's going to get a search. Basically, when you normal summon this card, it's not like a trigger effect, but while he's on the field, you can activate his effect inflicting 500 damage to your opponent, but you can't conduct your battle phase that turn. But the effect that you're going to be focusing on primarily is his in-phase effect, where he searches a level 10 Earth Machine monster from your deck and adds it to your hand. Really, really good. You only play him at 1 because he's just your target to get out with Urgent Schedule, so otherwise outside of that he's kind of a brick because he doesn't really like level modify himself in any capacity. And speaking of level modifications, we played 2 copies of Flying Pegasus Railroad Stampede for that reason. Not only is this card a monster reborn where you can target 1 Earth Machine monster in your graveyard except Flying Pegasus and special summon it in defense position, it can modify its level by targeting that monster and then making his level that targeted monster's level. So he targets the level 10, becomes level 10, and it's literally like if you can set up a level 10 Earth Machine monster in your graveyard, it's basically an OTK in and of itself. It's an extremely strong card. You do only play it at 2 because, like, outside of turn 1, it's not like, aside from turn 1, it's not really effective. If you have this card in your hand turn 1, you're most likely not going to be making use out of it unless you open like Urgent Schedule in this card, in which case, you know, you can definitely make more plays. It leaves you a little susceptible to Nibiru at that point because you will be making more than 5 summons in the turn. But I think 2 is really good. You can bring it out off of Urgent Schedule, and you can also bring Bullet Train out. You can link into Angry Knuckler, and then on the end phase, you can use Bullet Train's, Bullet Train's effect to add Stampede back to your hand, and then utilize that next turn. So it definitely has its uses. It's kind of like pseudo-searchable through the Urgent Schedule combination. Unfortunately, you can't search it from Switchyard, but it's just, you don't really want to open it turn 1, if you don't have any kind of plays to make. It's not terrible if you do, because, you can still play, but it's just more powerful, if you're able to kind of push the game past turn 1. So 2 copies, definitely I think the right ratio. Then we have 3 Ash Blossom, pretty standard. 3 copies of Lightning Storm, because you definitely want to be able to play through back row. Definitely the deck's weakness is like a trap heavy deck where they can just like target, spot remove some of your cards. So definitely Virtual Worlds trap is really big. If you're playing against like BAPK, they're usually setting their Fog Blades, so you definitely want to be able to get rid of those. And it just kind of like hits any other interruption at the back row. I know some pure Zoo decks are playing like Solemn Strike and other traps like that in the main, so this definitely kind of plays around that. Harpy's Feather Duster for the exact same reason. And then we have 3 Pot of Extravagance. Now this might be a little bit weird because you normally see deck lists playing like Pot of Desires. I definitely just don't want to Desires away like a lot of my cards. I've Desires away like multiple level 4s. When I wasn't playing Ruffian Railcar, I Desires away 2 Stampede, and then I like drew into Urgent Schedule. At that point, Urgent Schedule is dead. So I figured a good way to kind of mitigate that risk is to play Pot of Extravagance and just play like 3 of all of your extra deck monsters, because you don't need a lot in your extra deck. You're just killing your opponent. You're not really wanting to go into the grind game if you can avoid it, so you're not going to be using cards like Nightmare Phoenix and Unicorn and like other utility cards like that. You're just using cards that really pressure your opponent into kind of playing at a very quick and fast pace, really make them kind of waste the resources so they don't get killed, and then being able to just push through that and kill them regardless. So Pot of Extravagance's drawback of banishing your extra deck monsters in this case isn't really that important. So it's there, it's draw power, very, very strong. 1 copy of Terraforming to search either Mystic Mine here or Revolving Switchyard. 1 Called by the Grave because you do want to avoid getting hand trapped at all costs. Ogre really hurts the deck, especially if they hit like your Gustav Max. Valor can kind of, hinder the OTK if you, just use Libe's effect, go into the battle phase before you enter, they'll just Valor it so you can't kill them that turn. It just has general utility. Then we have Forbidden Droplets. This card is really good because you can just send like any card from your hand or field to the graveyard to negate your opponent's effects while they're on the field and also have their attack. Having their attack is really important because sometimes like a monster is just too big to kind of swing over for game. It'll put your opponent low, but it doesn't put them low enough to where they can't mount a comeback. And Droplets' effect to have the attack of your opponent's monsters is very, very good in conjunction with Libe. Libe can attack multiple monsters your opponent controls up to the number of material it has +1. So if they have like a full field and you can't like swing for game or can't find a way to swing just like directly for game, you definitely want to be able to like beat over all those monsters and make a game. Droplets does that while also negating the effects. Very, very good card. Good going first, good going second. Urgent Schedule. We talked about this a little bit when I was talking about the monsters. It summons a level 4 and a level 10 Earth Machine monster from your deck. It's actually a level 4 or lower and a level 5 or higher Earth Machine monster, but in this deck, obviously, you play level 4s and level 10s, so that's what you'll be bringing out. It does have a 2 secondary effects. You cannot actually declare attacks the turn you activate this card except with machine monsters. So the only reason why I mentioned that is because we do play Golden Lord. So if you use this and then you have Golden Lord infield and you think you're going to be able to swing for game with Golden Lord, you're not going to be able to, unfortunately. Thankfully, most of the time you're just going to be using Golden Lord as material for a machine rank 10, so it's not going to really come up that often, but it is something to note. Its last effect is, if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard while it's set on the field, you get to search 1 level 10 machine monster from your deck and add it to your hand. So you can actually Golden Lord this away if you have multiple copies of it, and then get the search effect of Urgent Schedule, because it doesn't have to be destroyed, it just has to be sent from the field to the grave. Pretty neat. Then we have 1 copy of Set Rotation because getting to your field spells just is like added consistency. Since this card is basically a Rhoda for any of the Earth level 10s, you definitely want to see it. And this is just really, really strong in and of itself. And since your opponent most likely won't be getting any use out of Revolving Switchyard, it doesn't matter if you give your opponent this card. And you could usually answer Mystic Mine with Golden Lord in any sort of capacity. Most of the time, you'll also just be summoning 2 monsters, overlaying them into 1, using the effect of Rail Cannon Gustav Max, going into Libe effect, and then, gaming your opponent, just fucking bonking him on the dome piece with Libe. So Mystic Mind doesn't really stop you from pushing from game. Then we have 3 Infinite Impermanence. Once again, this is just kind of like the standard hand trap. Great effect negation. It can turn off floodgates, like there can only be one, which kind of sucks, you know, if you're going against it, because you can't really summon any more of your big machine beaters. But you do play Golden Lord to kind of mitigate your auto lose to floodgates. So cards like Summon Limit really hurt also, and you don't see them cited too often, but you might in the future, so it's definitely something to be cognizant of. Quickly to the extra deck. The 3 Zeus, because basically if you attack with any of these monsters, you can just overlay for Zeus and wipe the board. So if you're really struggling and you're just going to kind of poke with like Dora or something, since it has its invincibility clause, main phase 2, you can just go into Zeus and then wipe the board. This will usually still have 2 material. You're not kind of abusing Zeus like you would in Zoo, where you can get multiple uses out of it, you know, through its lifespan, but you do play 3, so it's definitely possible to kind of resolve Zeus's effect more than once in a game. Then we have the OTK man himself, Juggernaut Libe. This card detaches 1, gains 2,000 attack, and it can attack monsters your opponent controls up to the number of material it has +1. The only downside to this card, unfortunately, is when you use this effect, it is the only card that can attack for the rest of the turn. But usually at this point in its game, because you just go into Gustav Max, burn your opponent for 2k, then you just have to deal 6k. This card in and of itself gets up to 6k, so if you clear your opponent's board, it is game with a direct attack. Third here, we have Super Dora. Super Dora is a really nice rank 10 to go into if your opponent makes you go first. Most of the time you can kind of end with a copy of Derricrane, and its quick effect, you detach 1 material from this card, then target 1 face-up monster on the field. That target is unaffected by cards except its own until the end of this turn. So you can target him, he is a 4k booty that is unaffected by other card effects until the end of the turn. Very, very hard for your opponent to get over. I think even meta decks would have a very hard time getting over this card. And if you're detaching Derricrane, you can use this as an interruption to punish your opponent for really not reading the cards. Then Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Gustav Max. I'm getting tongue-tied because I've said this card's name so much. This is just a detach and then burn your opponent for 2,000 damage. Really good in conjunction with Derricrane. I definitely talked about this when I talked about Derricrane, so you should know what it does. Then Double-Headed Anger Knuckler, excuse me. This card is a Link 2, and it requires 2 machine monsters, and it cannot be used as Link material. And you can only use one of the following effects of this card once per turn and only once that turn. During your main phase, quick effect, you can send 1 monster from your hand or field to the graveyard, then target 1 level 10 machine monster in your graveyard, special summon in defense position, but its effects are negated. Second effect, if this card is in your graveyard, you can send 1 card from your hand or field to the graveyard, special summon this card. This card is really good as a way to kind of like recur resources. You can also go into this using your urgent schedule and then kind of facilitate like more rank 10 plays in a single turn. So if you have ways to just kind of like keep extending, so if you open up like 3 level 10, or like, I don't know, 3 level 10s, I guess, or like 2 level 10s or a level 10 in Pegasus, you know, you're able to go into these, summon another one, use Double-Headed Anger Knuckler after you link summon. You can even tribute it, summon back a 10, summon another 10, push for more damage. So it definitely like extends the deck's play lines a little bit more. It's definitely very good. Then for the extra deck, we have 2 Alpha and 1 Pankratops because this is just general spot removal. We play Token Collector because of decks like Infernoble and Dragon Link. It's sort of the tokens, lets you not be Nibiru'd. Then you play 3 Artifact Lancia because it is basically an auto win against Dragon Link, and there's you know, a couple other decks where Lancia is just like an auto win against like Dino, and Dino's kind of challenging because Conductor can just flip your shit face down. Then we play Cosmic Cyclone, just another way to remove back row, kind of against like Eldritch. You know, you really want to play through their back row the best you can. Red Reboot because we hate back row, Skill Drain for when they make us go first. We can play under Skill Drain pretty well because you can normal summon this, then it's back at 3,000. When this gets special summoned, it goes back to 28 because when this card is special summoned from the hand, it does have its attack and defense halved. And then while this card is on the field also and you have Skill Drain, you do not have to send cards you control to the graveyard to attack. So it is a 3,000 beat stick. Pretty nice. And then lastly, Metaverse. For the same reason that we play Skill Drain, we would love to be able to set Mystic Mind in our opponent's turn so they can't play. Generally, just kind of the play you're going to be making with that. And also, it's, you know, it fetches any field spell, so it can also fetch Revolving Switchyard kind of later in the game if the game's kind of grindy. So, yeah, I think that about wraps it up for the deck profile, so let's go ahead and jump into some duels. Alright, so Duel 1, we have a really fun match here, so let's go ahead and get into it. I don't really know the aim of this guy's deck. I guess it was more of just like a control deck, but you can see here that we open up pretty strong. Start off with a Pot of Extravagance. We have Called by the Grave in hand. We have Nibiru, Infinite Impermanence, Urgent Schedule, Lightning Storm, and Ash. So we were pretty much ready for whatever he could throw at us. Unfortunately for us, we don't have a way to put 2 monsters on board to OTK, so we are just going to slowly bide our time. So we can feel free to set our cards here, because if our opponent keeps setting cards, we can still Lightning Storm because we don't control any face-up cards currently. So we can still Lightning Storm if he decides to just set cards. I also decided to set Urgent Schedule here, knowing that he was playing Twin Twister, because if this card leaves the field, I do get to search, and that's just one piece closer to being able to OTK our opponent on the following turn. So I think after this, we end up just kind of passing turn here constantly. I didn't want to set another Ash even though I had 2 copies in hand, just because I didn't want to run into this here, where if I had another machine monster I could summon and then had Bullet Train, I wouldn't be able to summon Bullet Train. So I figured I would just, hold my cards. I knew that he couldn't have, anything playable at this point in time, just because, it's kind of back and forth and back and forth. I don't really know what he's playing, so I figured it's still safe to just kind of set my cards, pass, discard a card on the end phase. But what's weird here is that he didn't summon Planet Pathfinder here. If he summoned Planet Pathfinder, or even used Numeron Wall's effect at some point in time, he could have just gotten his Numeron field spell. Whatever, it's not even in here. The one that sends Numeron calling from his deck to the graveyard. Unless he only plays 1 copy, then at that point he would just activate and then activate this from hand. Yeah, but he could have had access to Zexal at this point, or at least pushed for damage. I'm not sure. I don't think he knew what I was playing at this point, because nothing I've used so far has really given anything away. So I just, kept setting and passing. I really think this guy kind of misplayed. He must have not been familiar with the deck. But if anything, this is EDO Pro, so he should have been getting notifications to use cards like this, when they're available. But he does have the Red Ice Fusion here, and I did hold the Ash for it, so went ahead and just Ash that. Otherwise, it would have been a little bit of a hard card to get over. Here's fine. Chaining Twin Twister's okay. I drew the field spell, so now I have the OTK. I discard a card, summon Night Express Knight, special summon Bullet Train, and then we do the whole thing where we go for Gustav Max, burn for 2k, go into Liebe, use its effect, boost itself by 2000, and then attack for game. And that's game 1. Alright, going into game 2 here, we open up pretty well again. We open up Revolving Switchyard, Droplets, Lightning Storm, Pot of Extravagance, and Infinite Impermanence. Our opponent opens up Terraforming Harpy's Feather Duster, Red Eyes Black Dragon, you hate to see it, a Kaiju, and Lightning Storm. I assumed that he would just be making me go first, because usually when people lose to trains, they just make us go first. Knowing his deck right here, I didn't really have to make any play that I didn't want to go ahead and make, strictly because I knew he was playing cards that wouldn't allow for an OTK. So I'm good to just pass here. I can hold the Infinite Impermanence without setting it. I know he plays Twin Twister, so I'm assuming he's probably siding those out, or maybe putting Cyclones in. I'm really unsure. He may have just kept the Twin Twisters in at that point, but I didn't really want to lose the Impermanence to anything like that, and it's equally good in the hand at this point. So he draws for turn and draws Mystic Mine, and then concedes. I think his plan here was to get me to put a monster on board and then deck me out via Mystic Mine, but yeah, that clearly wasn't happening, so there goes our game 1. We are currently 1-0 with a swift 2-0 against this guy. Alright, so going into game 2 here, we are playing against Eldritch Zoo, and the only reason why I eventually end up finding out that it's Eldritch Zoo is because he's playing Book of Moon. You don't really see any other Eldritch deck playing Book of Moon aside from the Zoo version, so he chooses to set Infinite Impermanence, set Sanguine, and set Book of Moon. And in our opening grip, we have Harpy's Feather Duster, Lightning Storm, Forbidden Droplets, Switchyard, and Heavy Freight Train Derricrane. Is that the OTK I see? I believe it is. Let's see what we draw for turn, and it is a Nibiru. Better late than never, still good in the grip. I fire off the Lightning Storm here, my opponent chains Sanguine, and then lets the rest of his back row die, sending Book of Moon and Infinite Impermanence to the grave. I play the field spell, discard the Droplets because it's just dead at this point, and normal summon our Night Express Knight. I have searched the Heavy Freight Train Derricrane in hand and will be activating its effect now to summon itself. I then overlay for Super Dora, and here, this is where you really need to think. Here I detach Night Express Knight because I don't know what is in his hand. If I went ahead and detached the Derricrane and popped this, went into Libe and then used Libe's effect, that opens me up to Gamma, and then I would lose my one monster on the field and just be left with a Feather Duster and a Nibiru in the hand. That is less than optimal, so here I just do the play that you should normally do. If you can wait to use Daracrane's effect, do it when you make Libe. So here I go into Libe, detach, pop with Daracrane, and then I am good for the 6k for lethal. Alright, here we are in Game 2 versus Eldritch, and our opening hand is Infinite Impermanence, Night Express Knight, Pot of Extravagance, Eldritch the Golden Lord, and Nibiru. And our opponent's opening hand, they have Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, Eldritch the Golden Lord, Conquistador, Cosmic Cyclone, and Tenki. This man's hand is pretty not bad. Tenki really does get him there in this instance. The Cyclone for protection, and then the Golden Land and the Golden Lord for a follow-up is very, very strong. So let's see what he does here. My opponent opts to make me go first, as is per usual, and then I get hit with the Ash Blossom. Once again, I don't really see the need to set Infinite Impermanence as equally as live, and I don't want to lose out to any back row removal a la Twin Twister or Cosmic Cyclone, so I just pass to my opponent. With the protection of Nibiru in the hand, I don't really feel like he can do much. He can go for Zeus in his main phase 2 if he wants to, but Nibiru still protects me against that because to get much use out of Zeus, he needs to climb, and then Nibiru is live after that. So our opponent draws Alpha, which would be good had I put a monster on board. He uses Tenki here to search for Therablade. Therablade stacks over in Chakanine, and Chakanine swings for 17 direct. In main phase 2, my opponent stacks Morbo, stacks Tiger Mortar, and then stacks Zeus, leading me to Nibiru him as he attempts to leave his main phase 2. Summoning the token in attack position and summoning my Nibiru in attack position, my opponent sets one more card and passes to me. I now draw Railcar. Great. Talk about a brick. This card really doesn't do much here because I can't normal summon it and link off into anything because Nibiru, unfortunately, is a rock and not a machine. So I decide to set Ruffian and set my copy of Infinite Impermanence and pass into the end phase Cosmic Cyclones, paying 1,000 life points to banish my Imperm. That's what I was afraid of, and that's why I didn't set it to begin with, because I didn't need to. There's no reason to take unnecessary risks, especially when you're playing a deck where you have to really min-max appropriately. If you can't do that according to your deck that you're playing, then you really should be playing meta, because more meta decks are kind of forgiving when it comes to playing them. You could really make a couple mistakes and still end up on a pretty decent board, but if you're playing anything tier 2 or below, especially like a rogue deck, you need to think about these things ahead of time. You need to know the meta, know what your opponent could be siding in against you, and know what your opponent could be maining. I knew my opponent would probably side in Cosmic Cyclones just for the field spell and for Mystic Mind if he, kind of had an inkling I was playing that. And, you just kind of have to have those types of thought processes. So I still do lose out to the Cyclone at the end of the day, but I only set the Impermanence here so it would be live on the next turn. So I pass to my opponent. My opponent Golden Lords my set. Golden Lord summon himself after sending a card from his field, and then beats over the Nibiru and then hits me for 3k directly. On the end phase, he triggers his copy of Conquistador to set Sanguine, and then I am able to trigger my copy of Ruffian Railcar, searching me my missing piece. Now I know what my opponent has, and I know that he doesn't have any form of interruption. So I'm able to, on my draw, normal summon Night Express Knight, summon Daracrane using his effect, overlay into Gustav Max here, burn it for 2k, and now I don't really have to be particular about which card I detach at this point because I'm not going to be popping any of his monsters. I think I end up popping the Scarlet Sanguine here just to trigger its effect, but it doesn't really matter because if you can do the math here, 6k over 3035 is still lethal, so I do just that. I go into Libe, detach, Daracrane pop his back row, he chains the Scarlet Sanguine, which does nothing, and then I enter the battle phase, swing over the Nibiru, and then swing over the Golden Lord for game, and that clutches us our game 2, another 2-0. Here we are in our third and final match. Now, I did forget to save our game 1 here, but this guy did beat me. He opened up game 1, pretty much the exact same hand he opens up here, except this wasn't punishment. He had the Shadal card after doing the Dogmatica play on me, so he did win game 1. I did forget to save it. I don't unfortunately have it, but I did lose, and now we are in game 2 post-sighting. So, luckily for us, we get to choose second, and I open up Revolving Switchyard, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, another copy of Switchyard, Urgent Schedule, and Lightning Storm. This is a very good hand. Unfortunately for us, our opponent opens up Haquero, Numeron Network, Eldritch of the Golden Lord, Dragma Punishment, and Disciples of the Nadir, so Nadir's Servant. Now, this hand is amazing. There's no way, shape, or form that I can get around this. It is just a very, very strong hand. So our opponent's in the play, and he leads with Numeron Network. discarding a copy of Numeron Calling to summon 3 Numeron cards from his extra deck, and then he overlays into Utopic Zexal. This card is amazing. Luckily, I had the Ash Blossom for his Nadir. He passes, and then I top deck the stones. I either needed to top deck this or impermanence to be able to kill him this turn, and I get very, very lucky. So I use Droplets, discard my copy of Revolving Switchyard, chain it to Utopia Zexal's effect, and then I negate Zexal. So now all I have to worry about is this mystery back row. I don't know what it is, but luckily I have Lightning Storm to wipe his spell and traps. I activate Switchyard, chaining Urgent Schedule, summoning out Bullet Train and Ruffian Railcar. Now, when I believe it is a level 10 Earth Machine type monster is normal summon or special summon to your field, except during the damage step you can activate this effect. Your opponent takes no battle damage for the rest of the turn, even if this card leaves the field. Also, you special summon 1 level 4 Earth Machine monster with 1800 or more attack from your deck, and if you do, it becomes level 10. So I decide to summon Ruffian Railcar here, and I believe Super Express Bullet Train. Then I summon out Flying Pegasus Railroad Stampede. These cards have long names, folks. And I do this because on the end phase, I'm going to be linking these, or in the main phase too, I'll be linking these 2 cards off here. This gets Bullet Train Engrave and also Pegasus, and Bullet Train allows me to add back Railroad Stampede. This also gets me a search on the end phase, so I'm effectively taking 2 cards, turning them into 1, and then getting 2 cards on the end phase. So you see here, I do the old detach burn for 2k, go into this, and then beat over Utopia Zexal. Now Anger Knuckler here has a really nice interaction if it ends up going through, where I contribute Anger Knuckler on my next turn, or my opponent's turn, and special summon Super Express Bullet Train. That meets this condition to summon a level 4 monster, or a monster with 1800 attack or more from the deck, which would be another copy of Railroad Stampede, and then Railroad Stampede would get to summon another card back from the graveyard. So that is a nice little interaction on your opponent's turn, since it won't matter because you can't deal battle damage on your opponent's turn. Unfortunately for us, I believe this gentleman has a way to get rid of that, and he knows it. Pass, and he draws Scarlet Sanguine, a great draw. He discards Golden Lord and Hawkwearer to send my field spell, brings Golden Lord back by sending Sanguine. This gives him a copy of Sanguine and Conquistador on his end phase, unfortunately for us. I chain my effect, bringing back Bullet Train to get the add on the end phase after its destruction. He goes to battle phase, swings over, and then passes to me. Of course, now we have Scarlet Sanguine and Conquistador that we have to play around, but I am getting a add back from Bullet Train on the end phase, and I believe I add back Ruffian Railcar. I now have 3 cards on my opening grip, and then I draw Cosmic Cyclone. This is the best possible draw next to a Lightning Storm here, because I can just chain it to Hawkwearer, or Conquistador whenever he chooses to activate it. So I normal summon Pegasus, uses effect, revive Bullet Train from grave, activate Derricrane to summon itself, and then I go into an Xyz. Baiting this, I use Cosmic Cyclone to banish the Conquistador, and he doesn't get the pop. I burn him for 2k, attempt to pop his back row, he chains, summons another Golden Lord, and then I overlay into Libe. Libe effect, gain 6, swing, swing, and then my opponent has nothing. Now this is amazing here. I can use Double-Headed Anger Knuckler's effect, or Anger Knuckle effect, to tribute summon the Railroad Stampede to summon itself back to the field. This makes Bullet Train live, so I can keep recycling Pegasus on the end phase. Then I overlay into Zeus. Now, since an Xyz monster attacked, I can overlay into Zeus, and I figured here, because of what's in his graveyard, he has a Sanguine and the Golden Lords. My opponent would be able to kind of recycle the resources like Eldritch does, and this really threatens his board state here. Now I'm sitting here in a very good position, so I'm thinking, I was like, you know, I don't know what he can really top deck here that can get him out of this position. But of course, you never tempt fate because he draws Nadir. Nadir sends a copy of Natis, searching himself an Ecclesia. Natis pops my copy of Zeus, Anger tributes it to summon a monster just so I don't lose out on that interaction. Summons our Ecclesia, searches the Maximus, sets this, summons the Maximus, sends this for Golden Lord, Maximus effect. I send 2 copies of Anger Knuckler because all I really need is 1 in circulation. Apparently he must have sided out, no, he didn't side out shit at all, so I don't know why he didn't search that card and search the Beast instead. But here we see that he draws Lancia, not sure why he sided that in against me. I do pretty much no banishing, and then he swings for big damage. Luckily for me, he's not able to put any interruption on the board for the next turn. And then I am able to recycle Bullet Train, get back Derricrane. I draw Golden Lord for turn, a dead draw unfortunately, but I do have game here on board. I normal summon Pegasus, bring back Bullet Train, and summon Derricrane. Here I'm going for game. He has to activate Fleur-de-Lis here to negate this, or he loses. I use Derricrane to pop Maximus, overlay into Libe, and just swing. I didn't want to lose out to an Ogre, so I decided not to activate his effect, although using Ogre on the copy of, on our copy of, oh god, they have so many different names. I forgot which name it is. Gustav Max to burn for 2k. He should have done it there if he had it, but I still didn't want to accidentally play into something, you know, maybe he misplayed or misclicked. I didn't want to play into Ogre regardless. So, thankfully, we got game 2, even though our opponent probably could have sealed the deal on this match and beat me. But yeah, so we'll be going into game 3. Alright folks, we are now into game 3. Our opening hand has Cosmic Cyclone, Forbidden Droplets, Revolving Switchyard, Forbidden Droplets, and Night Express Knight. Our hand is technically the OTK, so let's see what our opponent opened up with. We have Numeron Wall, Cursed Eldland, Conquistador of the Golden Land, Neshadal Aerial, and then Dogmatica Punishment. So our opponent's hand isn't as strong as his last 2 hands have been, but they are still very strong. So let's play the game here. And, surprisingly, our opponent chooses to go first. Getting Numeron Network on the field, this is a very powerful spell card, and Utopia's Exile is just as powerful. Uses Cursed Eldland here to search his Golden Lord, and then just sets a card. Now, since he only has 1 interruption, I'm assuming that he probably didn't think I'd have a way to break his board, or he thought that he just didn't want to commit a lot of resources to the board just to get hit by Lightning Storm or Harpy's Feather Duster. So Dragma Punishment here, Dogmatica Punishment, is still a really good card to set in and of itself, but this here loses out to just like a single backer removal and like a single effect negation. And unfortunately for him, that is exactly what I have in my hand. For turn, I draw my 3rd copy of Forbidden Droplets, which thank god I have more copies in hand because all it is good for is just to negate the Utopia's Exile here. So we negate this Exile effect, activate Cosmic Cyclone, banishing his punishment, activate Switchyard, Switchyard effect, discard the 3rd copy of Droplets, search for our Derricrane, normal summon, chain Derricrane's effect to summon, go into Gustav Max here, detaching the Night Express Knight playing around Gamma, and here we end up just popping the Zexal and attacking for a game. So, that is 3 matches. These were all back-to-back. I wouldn't really consider the first game against meta, but it was a very interesting deck. But these last 2 are both against Eldritch variants that are very strong. Zoo Eldritch is a deck that you will see a lot of, and this pile of garbage that we played against, you might see a lot of also. Mixing of engines right now is extremely popular, so it wouldn't surprise me to see similar decks like this. So, in closing, I really like trains as a deck. They are very fun, super high, like I want to say high impact. They hit hard, they play fast, they win fast, and overall the cards themselves are just very interesting. You don't see a lot of high-ranking, like ranked monsters being played in the current format. You know, aside from back in the early formats of Eldritch where people were still playing like the train package to OTK your opponent. But this deck just does that type of mechanic better. And it's a lot of fun. So I definitely recommend testing this deck if you're into rogue decks like that. I did have the deck list in the beginning of the video, so if you don't mind, let me know what you think of the deck. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments, so if you can please like this video, comment on it, ring the notification bell if you would like to see more of these videos. You'll get notified every single time I post one. I do now have a Discord link down in the description, along with the link to my Instagram and a link to my Twitter. So follow those if you guys want to see more shiny cardboard. I've been posting a lot of that stuff to my Instagram lately. So yeah, once again guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.